They want to put their money where their mouth is. They just want it to count. And on the flip side, employees want that too. So, I think we're just trying to find that ground where you can work at a company that does care about your career and does care about your financial well-being. And I think making it more than a menu and drawing them into being a part of the company through ownership is an awesome way to do it.
That's Ben Wigert, Director of Research and Strategy for Gallup's Workplace Management. He's my guest today. Welcome to Invested at Work, a show about unlocking the power of workplace financial benefits for companies and their employees. I'm Rodney Bolden, Head of Industry Engagement and Learning for Morgan Stanley at Work, and your host. So what makes you invested at work? As companies navigate a shifting workplace landscape, one thing is clear. Re-engaging employees and rebuilding commitment is key. On today's episode, we're exploring what improving engagement and retention looks like, and the role well-rounded workplace benefits, including equity compensation, play in reconnecting people to purpose. Ben, welcome.
Thank you, Rodney. It's a pleasure to be here.
So when we think about the employee experience, in recent years, there have been a lot of terms, all of them great, attached to them. So we went from the great resignation to the great reshuffling to the great betrayal to now what Gallup is saying is the great detachment. Talk to me about that path through those various greats and what you've seen in the research.
Yeah. The Great Detachment specifically is a concerning trend we're seeing across the U.S. and some parts of the global workforce, where employees' overall satisfaction with their employer has dropped to record lows, and it's dropped to record lows multiple times since the pandemic. Today, only about 18% of employees are highly satisfied with their work. And at the same time, we're also seeing a pattern where employees are looking for a new job at the highest rates we've seen since 2015. Specifically, about 51% of employees are watching for or actively seeking new job opportunities. Now, what's especially unique about this trend, Rodney, is that typically when people are dissatisfied with their job or looking for a new job, they actually act on it. They do that. They go find another job, right? But what we're seeing right now is that quit rates are actually slowing down. People are staying put, and that's largely because the economy is more difficult and the job market is cooled. And moreover, they saw people get really good jobs for good pay before this. So they're staying in place and they're staying stuck, harboring this frustration and discontent, which creates kind of a challenging cycle for folks. And it's very different from what we've seen in the past.
Okay, so let's talk about employee engagement specifically.
Sure.
Gallup, employee engagement, right now in the U.S., I think it's like 31% of employees are engaged and almost 20% of employees are disengaged, actively disengaged. Why is that? What's going on?
Yeah, you're right on with the numbers, Rodney. We're seeing a similar global pattern, both with U.S. and global engagement. We'd seen that rise steadily for about a decade until the pandemic hit. So with the fall of employee engagement, we've really dug deep into these trends and some of the leading causes of the drop in employee engagement. Down deep in the data are trends like employees becoming less clear of what's expected of them at work. That declining clarity of expectations has followed almost lockstep with the Great Detachment. At the same time, we're also seeing that employees are having trouble finding the same mission and purpose in their job as they did pre-pandemic. So if you put that together, you have a lot of change happening, as you articulated with all the disruption through all the greats, if you will, right? And people have lost their true north in terms of expectations and priorities. And worse, they've lost their purpose in achieving that. So that's in the data deep down behind the drop in employee engagement. And kind of the last thing I'll add there too is we've seen some declines in people feeling cared about at work, which usually signals they don't feel heard or valued to the same extent they previously did.
Yeah, that what was interesting to me is that people less than 4 in 10 employees feel that someone cares about them at work. Less than 4 in 10 feel that someone is respected at work.
Yes.
And less than 4 in 10 feel that someone is invested in their development at work.
Mm-hmm.
And the employee engagement number was the lowest since, I believe, 2014.
Correct.
What happened in 2014? Why was it this low in 2014?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing I should clarify too, when Gallup measures engagement, we're not talking about happiness or just satisfaction, right? We're measuring the needs of employees, from their individual productivity needs to their teamwork, to their connection to their company, to their growth and development, right? So this is a leading indicator of future performance and retention. So it's concerning when we see these declines, to your point. And being that we're at the lowest level of engagement since 2014, if you look back and circumstantially see why that happened, I think there's a good lesson in history there. Because 2014, oddly enough, connects to 2009. And do you know what happened in 2009?
No, Ben, what happened in 2009?
Well, for those of us who paid attention to the market, and the financial services industry, there was this thing called the Great Recession, Rodney, and that concluded in about 2009. But the reality is the ripple effects didn't end there. The reality is that employee engagement was suppressed for another 3 to 4 years, and companies didn't see a full financial turnaround for about another 5. It's about 2014 when the economy was starting to look pretty good, stronger, jobs are more available, unemployment was down. And in 2014, that's the last time that people looking for a job was this high. Now, funny enough, it was very different back then. When people were looking for a job, they took a good job. There were more jobs available.
They were leaving.
And that frustration had been pent up, right?
Right.
It had been pent up, but now it was being released and people were dispersing. They were leaving. Whereas today they're, excuse the term, trapped, but they were stuck in what they're doing. They didn't feel like that move was worth it to them.
Now, are you seeing the same thing on the manager level as far as engagement, disengagement, feeling trapped?
Yeah, that's a surgical question because, as you know, a manager's engagement cascades or permeates to their team. It's pretty hard to be more engaged than your boss or your boss's boss, right? And as you know, managers, especially middle managers, are the linchpin for their team's success, performance, and development. About 70% of the variance in a team's employee engagement can be attributed to the manager, but unfortunately, managers' engagement has dropped to the same level or lower than that of the people they manage. And we usually rely on that cascade of engagement to lift people up, carry them forward, give them clear direction, inspire them. Instead, managers' engagement has fallen. Their well-being has also decreased, and they're actually looking for new jobs at an even higher pace than the people they manage.
Oh my goodness. So the managers are looking at a higher percentage than the workers.
Yeah, indeed. We call it the manager squeeze. Managers are essentially stuck between the wants and needs of their employees, which have changed dramatically since the pandemic, and they're stuck between leaders guiding their organization forward, adjusting strategy, addressing financial difficulties, and they're trying to make it work for everybody. But in a world of widespread disruptive change, it's just becoming too much for them, and they're feeling overwhelmed. If you really go deep into what they're experiencing, we ask them how the economy impacts them, and they're telling us that their teams are being given more responsibilities than ever. Budgets are being cut, teams are being restructured. So it's the proverbial doing more with less, and by the way, with new people, because there's been so much turnover up to this point.
So it sounds like there's a high level of burnout among the managers that is cascading also to the employees.
Yes, correct.
So what can companies do? What can companies do to make employees feel more cared about, respected, and invest in their career development? I know that's a loaded, multi-pronged question there.
It's a big one. And, I would articulate the problems that I already laid out. There are opportunities, right? So when people are unclear on their expectations, which when I dive into that often comes down to priority paralysis. We have a lot of different priorities. Could range all the way from job descriptions and performance goals to how you work with your own team and cross-functionally. But going back to the basics, the foundations of employee engagement, ensuring people have the right expectations, have the right materials and equipment, feel like they're aligned to do what they can do best to work back to those basics is a really important starting point. The operative word I'd say through the leadership and management ranks right now is communication. How can we improve communication? And to make that in a more natural way that carries us forward, the thing I would really point to is getting back to a routine of ongoing weekly connects and conversations between each employee and their boss and their team. I think if we can get grounded back in the basics, open up that two-way line of communication, we know that's the thing that turns around employee engagement the fastest. It's also the thing that fuels performance and makes employees feel heard and valued.
Now, for those listeners and viewers that are HR leaders, and they're saying, well, hey, Ben, my managers, they all have weekly connects, so we must be good, right? That's not necessarily the case, right? What are some best practices for that weekly connect?
Yeah, there are best practices out there that people are living in each organization, so I do want to honor that. There's some tremendous bosses and coaches out there who are really in touch with their team, but I think they would be the first people to tell you they could get better. The managers who we give awards to for being manager of the year, just constantly talking about getting better and learning more with their team. One thing I'd shine light on is that often we think we're giving feedback, but that's not translating to meaningful feedback and recognition. So when we studied over 20 managerial behaviors from the perspective of both the manager and the employee, the behavior out of 20 that both parties said is not happening as well as it should be is providing weekly and meaningful feedback to their teams. And usually managers will point to the issue that they don't know what to talk about or what makes those conversations meaningful to their employees. They feel like they're communicating and talking, but it's not always translating to meaning and action. So when we study what makes a meaningful conversation, we found that often that includes things like goals and priorities. It includes recognition for what's being achieved. It includes support for how to move forward and enable high performance. And it also includes things like good teamwork and playing to your strengths. It doesn't have to be all those things or any one, but those are things that really both move the ball downfield and help that person feel seen and valued as an individual.
So you survey a lot of employees globally. What is your data saying what employees want from the workplace today?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially coming off the Great Detachment, where people are looking but not finding the job they want.
That's
right?
Why
So,
I asked,
that is
if they're detached, something's missing. What's missing?
Yeah.
What are they saying they want and need?
Yeah, right on. So we have, to your point, directly asked employees what is most important in the next job that they would take, that they would consider taking, what would make them take that leap, or I would argue maybe even re-engage with their current company. And top of that list from the 15 factors we studied is at the very top, work-life balance and well-being. It's number one. Number two is compensation. Number three is having a job that feels stable and secure. And number four is having a job where you feel like you can do what you do best. So some of that intrinsic motivation.
So before the pandemic, it sounds like employees were saying, I'm committed to doing the best job I can. My company rocks. This is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Now it's like, hey, there's more to work.
Yeah, they still want it, right? Still top 4 out of 15. And there's quite a drop off after that. But now they have rethought their expectations for a great job and a great life. I think about when we all sat home during the pandemic, maybe you're thinking about how to remodel that room, move that wall, redo the deck or the patio. Well, they started thinking about how they wanted to remodel their careers and what really mattered to them. It gave people time to think about what they really valued in life. So, well-being, work-life balance top, but within a percentage pointed to is compensation. They want to be taken care of by their company, right? And then stability remains right there, more important than ever in today's kind of uncertain and tumultuous times. And then still a job where they can play to their strengths, but not if they don't have the essentials in their mind.
There you go. Do you see that acknowledgement and recognition from the executive level of those employee needs? Is there consistency between the two, or is there a disconnect?
I think there is acknowledgement and knowledge of this. I know when we survey CHROs that about a quarter of them said that employee well-being was a top strategic priority of their organization. The leaders I talk to very much understand what turnover and burnout is costing them. And as leaders, hey, they've had a heavy load on their shoulders since the pandemic. Leaders of most organizations did a really good job leading change at the beginning of the pandemic, and that change fatigue just really wore people out. So I do see awareness. Unfortunately, at large, the changes being made right now aren't fully translated into employees. And I'm not saying that when a single organization intervenes through well-being practices, on rethinking their employee value proposition doesn't work. The organizations that I work with that do that do reap the rewards, but at large, employees are not feeling like the organization cares about their well-being because so many of the tools and resources that are implemented are not becoming part of their culture. They're on the sideline. The majority of people are not aware they exist. Often their boss is not aware they exist. Right. So there's a real communication and adoption problem out there when it comes to employers helping employees.
We consistently see that in research where, anywhere from, 15 to 25% of employees, when you ask them about different benefits, does your company offer this? Does your company offer that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And to your point about the HR folks thinking, hey, we're doing a great job, and employees saying, well, not so much, maybe because they don't have the benefit or they're not aware of the benefit. In the Employee Benefit Research Institute Workplace Wellness Survey that was done with Greenwald Research, when they asked employees to rate the job their employers are doing on helping them in their financial well-being, only about a third rated them excellent or very good. Yeah. Now then, in a separate survey, the Financial Wellbeing Employer Survey done by Ebury, they asked employers, HR leaders, hey, how you doing? 77% said, we're doing excellent or very good. Ben, that's a 40-point difference.
It's such important research. Often HR will point you to the Employee Assistance Program, the EAP, right? What we know largely is that only 50% of employees know they have one, say know they have one. 30% don't know, 20% say they don't. And inside that 50%, only about 20% who are aware of it, only about 20% use it, which is interesting, right? And then you start to play that out to the well-being program as you're talking about, again, a communication awareness issue, and then all the way down to is your manager having conversations about this? Or your teammates having conversations about this? So there's a strategic element to your point. We have to invest in the right places, the places that employees value that investment. We have to communicate it well. And then we have to make it part of our culture ultimately. If I put kind of a fine point, I think on what you're setting up here is that when I study employee burnout, what I've actually found is it's the way employees experience work and the way they're managed that are the very top drivers or predictors of burnout. Now, all the other things matter, right? Hours work matters. The resources and support you have matter. But it's actually the way you experience those hours that the top driver of burnout is actually fairness, believe it or not, followed by what you'd expect, followed by workload, followed by speed of work and density of work. But fairness first, workload second, and then manager communication and support third. So we have to drive this down to the team level. It needs to become a team sport. We need to support each other and our well-being, and we need to create the right norms and role modeling that we actually make this a part of work and not a tool on the sideline. So,
let's talk generations. What are some of the things you're seeing in your data as far as employee experience, engagement, burnout, what they want from the workforce when we look at the different generations? Because there's 5 generations still in the workforce. Soon, the 6th one, Gen Alpha will be in a couple of years.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, in context too, this year's the first year that Gen Z has eclipsed boomers. And I think we both remember, I don't know how many years of talking about boomers retiring. Right? What are we going to do? There's going to be no one to lead the company or work, right? And now it's happened. It's fascinating. I have a confession. I peeked at some of your research, and there is a unique alignment between what we recently found in our research and your research.
So let's talk about that. So you're talking about our State of the Workplace survey.
Yep.
And we're talking about benefits, specifically equity compensation. Mm-hmm. So equity compensation, when we ask the question, does your company offer equity compensation? Mm-hmm. So yes or no. Then when we did the subset of those who said no, would you like to receive equity compensation? Biggest group, millennials.
Yeah.
Over half.
Yeah.
The next group, Gen X, and Gen Z were almost tied at like 44, 45%.
Yeah.
The lowest was baby boomers at 25%.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I almost missed this pattern in the data myself. I compared our reasons for joining data to your data. The top 4 reasons for joining that I mentioned, from well-being, the compensation, to stability, to a job where you do your best, that is consistently the top factors across all generations. So I almost stopped there. They're amazingly universal. Everyone needs them. In the past, what we've seen is that younger people, especially millennials were the youngest, they wanted those things even more, even more, but everyone still wanted them. What was surprising to me that shouldn't have been is that right now millennials are even more demanding of those top factors: work-life balance, compensation, stability, than every other generation, including Gen Z. So I assumed linear relationship, younger people
Right.
need and want those things. Millennials actually are the highest, and that's so interesting for a couple reasons. It means it's not just life stage, right? It's not just life stage because they're no longer the youngest. They've carried over those expectations. I mentioned the Great Recession before. I'm barely a millennial, but I went through the grind. My wife went through my grind. It was hard to find jobs. We applied for 100 each, right? So that became ingrained in us. We also saw our parents be workaholics. So we started placing more value on well-being, a good paying job, health and wealth, right? And that's carried us over. And now I can see it as a millennial who has 2 children and is a mid-career professional. I mean, you really want that stability. You want the stability, and you want that to include that work-life balance and compensation. So I get it, but that's new information. Traditionally, it's been a linear relationship between age and those wants. And frankly, Gen Z get those kind of ugly stereotypes about being the needy,
Right.
the needy folks who just want more, right? They're not. Now, there are things that are higher on, like development, which you'd expect. They want a job where they can develop and advance, which is life stage. But yeah, and I saw your data with equity and millennials wanting more equity. And I get that too, by the way, right? I get, if you want stability, you want a job you can call home.
Right.
Right?
And creating that ownership culture,
Yep.
getting that skin in the game.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Something we haven't talked about that may or may not impact employee experience today. Return to office. What is the data saying from the perspective of the employees, the HR leaders, the executives?
I knew you were going to put me on the stand here because I have the numbers, right?
I know you got the
know that I
numbers.
have the numbers. I would lead my I'll say testimonial, not defense, testimonial that when you ask how RTO, return to office, is affecting engagement, that is a complicated question because it depends what you mean by RTO. If you mean RTO is 5 days a week full time, for people who could otherwise be working with some flexibility, that's one thing. If you're saying RTO is people coming to the office more often or being required to come to the office more often, that's another thing. But as of February, about 15% of employees said their organization had increased requirements to work on site more often compared to 2024. The majority of those employees are increasing the number of days they're on site. Only about 5% of these remote capable workers whose jobs can be done at least partially remote are going full return to the office. That was February. But what I can tell you for certain today is that hybrid has a few different types of impact on workplaces, from advantages to challenges. In terms of advantages, hybrid and various types of flexible work have increased autonomy. They've increased efficiency and more efficient use of time, and they've improved worker well-being. So we know that as a fact, and organizations and leaders acknowledge that. So there's pretty good understanding and alignment there. In contrast, there's some challenges that flexible work and fully remote work create. With that increased autonomy becomes some challenges in how we coordinate and collaborate. So there's what I call the 4 C's: connection, collaboration, creativity, and culture. Those things are objectively more difficult to do when we're apart more often. Don't hear me wrong on that. They're not impossible to do. They require more intentionality, but they do create some headwinds. So we know those are things that we have to address with great intention. Otherwise, it's going to hurt our teamwork and our culture long term, especially as people turn over and you have new teams. So we're balancing autonomy with effective teamwork in a lot of ways.
I see that when I'm in the office where I overhear a conversation. Oh, you're talking about doing this. Let me tell you about this that I did.
Right.
And it's just that sort of incidental
Right.
collaboration
Yes.
that happens, that spontaneous
Yes.
collaboration.
Yes. Yeah, I think the net on this, the net effect is how well it's managed. How well organizations clarify what their policy is and give the proper amount of guide rails and autonomy within that framework so the team can be empowered to work more effectively together. Ultimately, it's going to come down to that manager, making sure it's well coordinated, the collaboration looks good, the culture looks good. And it's also going to come down to the tools and training, which employees have been very vocal about needing the tools, and we've seen pretty decent technological adoption. Where we haven't seen great adoption has been the training. Only about 3 in 10 managers and leaders say that they have been trained to lead a hybrid team. So I think people too often assume that just because we're doing it, and
Right.
it means that we're getting practiced at it, right? And that's where that intentionality comes in. So, at the end of the day, there are certainly multiple models that can work here. I've never seen one perfect model. The model has to work well for the customers, the culture, the teams. And at the end of the day, like, teams have to work together effectively. So we probably could have brushed up on our teamwork skills prior to the pandemic, and now it's more important than ever because that physical distance does create mental and emotional distance between us.
How about financial well-being? Because employees have an expectation that their employer will provide them with not only a paycheck, but benefits, compensation that will support and promote their financial well-being. And not only their financial well-being, but that of their families.
Yes.
Anything Gallup is seeing around financial well-being with employees?
We are seeing an increase in the usage of financial well-being programs. However, there's a long way for improvement. Currently, only about 21% of employees use a financial well-being program, or at least have recently used a financial well-being program. That compares to about 35% of people who use exercise or physical health program, and about 25% who use mental health services. So there's room for adoption to improve there for sure. But what we've seen is that organizations that really care about their employee value proposition, how they're supporting companies, do tend to lean into the financial aspect. I know you work a lot in the equity space, so I think bringing ownership into it has been a big part of that. Bringing people strong compensation packages, strong benefits packages, and equity is the foundation for psychological and financial ownership. It puts skin in the game. It helps you think like an owner. But to get the most out of it, you really do have to feel like you're part of something. You have to understand how it works. You have to understand how you contribute to the business strategy. So you really do feel like you have autonomy over moving that metric. And at the end of the day, you have to have some level of understanding of how that increases your wealth over time. And it's more than just a line on your paycheck, right?
Absolutely. And speaking about equity compensation, what we find in our annual State of the Workplace survey is that we find consistently employees are saying that it is one of the motivating factors at work is receiving equity compensation.
Yeah. I mean, I think two easy starting places are a combination of the career well-being and the financial well-being. It's just right there in front of you for an employer, right? Like, we want to work on the physical aspect, the community part, the social part, and you can get all those from work. But in the spirit of simplifying and integrating things, if you will, because there's only so many hours in the day, you can bring career conversations into your one-on-ones, in your team conversations. You can pull financial education and planning right into that. And to answer your first question, yes, we have seen an increase in organizations rethinking their total rewards package at large. It's a big expenditure for them, so they want that to be a good investment. But you can tie that right back to well-being and engagement, because they want to show that they are engaging their workforce. They want to put their money where their mouth is. They just want it to count. And on the flip side, employees want that too. So I think we're just trying to find that ground where you can work at a company that does care about your career and does care about your financial well-being. And I think making it more than a menu and drawing them into being a part of the company through ownership is an awesome way to do it.
More than a menu. That is so important. Shouldn't be a checklist. Right. I have all these benefits. Check. I don't even know what this one is. Check.
Yeah, I think, as a mid-career professional, and I've talked to you about this before, I think we forget about the frontline workers too, right? Equity is a really novel thing for frontline workers. I worked in staffing for 2 years before graduate school. I drove people to the fields and the factories and cold storage facilities, and some companies did offer equity. And while employees thought that was really, really cool, they were also very confused by it.
Absolutely.
How does it work? Does this come out of my compensation? Is this instead of something? Do I owe them something, right? Or do I have to do this so someone else can benefit? What's the catch?
Right.
So I think understanding how that works, maybe at the team level, maybe at the unit level, is important. Getting people on board sooner and understanding what investment can do for you in your life sooner is really key. And bringing someone and just sit down, each employee, and have a conversation about that is an amazing way to show you care about them that will tangibly pay off later, right?
Absolutely. I have one more question for you. So the great work that you do at Gallup, I want to know, though, personally, what makes you invested at work?
It's so simple. Rodney. I care about people and I want to help them, and I want to help organizations thrive. And the more organizations I can help thrive, the more people I can help. It's that simple, and I have the pleasure of getting to study how people work and live, and that's a very cool way to help them achieve that. And I'm honored to do it.
Excellent. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Thanks. If you're interested in more conversations about workplace financial benefits, subscribe to the show wherever you like listening to or watching podcasts. If you hear something you like, please share it with colleagues and friends. And if you want to learn more about what Morgan Stanley at Work can offer, visit us at morganstanley.com/atwork. Invested at Work is brought to you by Morgan Stanley at Work and hosted by me, Rodney Bolden. Our executive producers are Fiona Kelsey and Lisa Boyce. Our production partner is Sequel Media Incorporated.